Hi, everybody. We're going to talk about chapter 3 of your textbook, Error Words, Writing Broadcast News in the Internet Age. This is a chapter discussing a closer look at grammar and word choices. So, we said that writing for the ear requires an understanding that your audience members cannot go back and forth that easily. It's possible to go back and forth, but it's not really desirable and not comfortable to scroll back, listen, and watch again. And besides, like with a lot of media use, this can be a background activity. So when you're driving, you don't really stop your podcast and rewind, but you keep driving. So the information better be clear and concise. As such, first using verbs and adjectives that are punchy, short, commonly used, clearly understood, not easily confused with anything else. Don't use wordy verb forms because they are convoluted. For example, the panel voted to determine the construction of the bridge. Um, the panel voted to discuss, to decide on the construction of the bridge. Actually, in your textbook, it says to terminate the construction of the bridge, and it should be to stop building. So things like determine, to terminate, construction, configuration, specialized. BP banded together a specialized team to fight the leaking well. BP created a specialized team to fight the leaking well. So don't use the word banded together, because if it does have a literal meaning, to band together, the listener will think of band or banding and will be distracted from the actual meaning, putting together, creating. So simplify your verbs. Avoid negative verbs. 3 other convicts decided not to escape with the first 4. 3 other convicts stayed behind. Because when you put a not in front of a concept, sometimes it gets forgotten, but whatever follows, that sticks in our mind. Remember Borat? Not. So don't use that. Find replacements. Decided not to escape, decided to stay. Decided not to accept, decline. And this kind of exercise will be part of our final exam, actually. Will not prohibit, to allow. Would not find the defendant guilty, find the defendant innocent. The union did not accept the agreement, the union rejected the agreement. Replace all adjectives that are a little complicated, overwrought, but instead use short, powerful adjectives, and if you can, avoid using adjectives altogether. Antagonistic crocodile, it would be an angry crocodile. Remorseful, sorry. Gargantuan, large. Treacherous, dangerous. Because when we're thinking, when we say treacherous, it usually refers to a person, but dangerous can be anything. Watch out for sensational language and loaded words. These are words that, again, can be misleading. And if a person is listening to your story while driving 70 miles per hour, they may not be able to pause and unpack your metaphors or your sensational words. The recall-prone SUV, the troubled health reform law, the controversial police drug lab, puzzling Afghan president, the bumbling lawmakers. Like, what exactly is bumbling lawmakers? I have no idea what it means. And especially when I'm busy doing something else, cooking, I don't have time to think about those things. Just say the lawmakers, or if they're acting slowly, say they're slow. If they're talking too much, say they talk too much. Okay, so be vigilant for loaded words, because loaded words can mean a lot of different things, and if they carry a baggage, for example, instead of saying somebody is wounded, so you can say was injured. You get wounded in a war. Somebody's a prisoner. I don't know. You don't say rapist. You don't say robber. Those are bad words to use. So, sensational language, loaded words, don't use them. And limit jargon. By jargon, we mean language used by specialists and by a group of people that is not the whole society. Jargon can be professional and can be street jargon, as well as regional lingo, regional speech, unless you're in a local environment. But nowadays, nothing is local anymore. Everything is online. Don't play with words. Limit your wordplay. There's bad news brewing for coffee drinkers. The price of a cup of joe is going up. The grounds for this price hike are new labor agreements in Brazil. Industry officials say it won't take a lot of time for these costs to percolate down to us. Our wallets should feel the jolt in 2 months. So this is a lot of cliche words and a lot of wordplay. It's kind of tempting sometimes, but you see it very often on television, almost always on television. Radio tends to be a little more serious, especially the serious kind, National Public Radio and the BBC. I'm only going to talk about serious radio because the non-serious kind usually plays songs and music, and we're not going to write songs, are we? I mean, you can if you want, but I'm here to help you learn how to write copy. So, cut out unnecessary words and phrases. Cut out any unnecessary part of a sentence that you can. Anything that can go should go. A repetition can be useful only if used sparingly, only if it's sparing, and only if it's used to emphasize. I came home to my mother, the mother who raised me since I was a baby. So if you use the same word twice, it better have a reason. Special case for the word say, it does not get cut. So I have to make a request, especially in the beginning of a story, especially, a lot of people tend to use the same word multiple times because it's an important word and it feels like you cannot do without it. So you end up putting it 2 or 3 times within 1 or 2 sentences. Those are called redundancies, and redundancies can be eliminated because we can be more economical by cutting some of them out. If you have to use the word, find a synonym if you cannot do without it. But the verb to say is a special exception. We use say as much as we need to, as much as we want. And I'm asking you, never use the word stated, maintained. Sometimes you can say explained, but in news writing, says is the best word to use. Says. Oh, a little bit of information about the time. Because when you hear someone speak, it is present time, present tense. So it would be odd to hear someone speak to you in human language and to use past tense as if things have happened in the past. The speech aspect of broadcast news and speaking for listening invites present tense and usually present continuous. Use the ending ing. So, says, saying, is saying are good choices. Attribution, we noticed in one of the examples in the previous chapter when the police representative was named in great detail. That was appropriate for a newspaper story. But for a broadcast story, you would want to say, according to police, or police say, because we really do not have the luxury of going too deep into detail unless we hear the person's voice, unless the person becomes part of your story and you actually hear the police chief or the police spokesperson say something as an actuality. If the name is important, use the name. In most cases, attribution does not need to be very detailed because, as we understood before, speaking for the air requires brevity. Another thing from grammar is that we prefer active voice instead of passive voice because we want to visualize things as they happen in order to help our audience members to capture the meaning more easily. We make it vivid, we make it easy to visualize. So if you say the boy kicked the ball, it's easy to see and it's easy to imagine it. Plus, boy and ball are easy to figure. But if you're saying that, the ball has been kicked too many times, by whom? First of all, we're not putting responsibility on anybody if we're using passive voice. It sounds like things are happening on their own. And secondly, it is really, it requires a little bit of a thought process to imagine the action when it's in passive voice. Whereas in active voice, it's really easy to make up a picture of it. So change from passive voice to active voice to make your speech more direct. And usually that is a very good strategy for all kinds of writing, not just for broadcast. So in order to strive for more dynamic verbs, dynamic word forms, you go for active verbs, punchy, ringing, something that has a ring that does not really confuse the audience member. And finally, the final idea is do not allow any ambiguous pronouns to exist in your sentences. Whenever you have a pronoun, make sure that if necessary, it is replaced by a noun, because we don't want something like this. The Supreme Court has overturned a lower court death penalty ruling. This is considered a landmark in penal law. Another example, the dog show is tough on both judges and the contestants. They have to sit quietly for hours. We don't know who has to sit quietly for hours, the dogs or the judges. After the oil spill, the ship's owners fired the captain and the first mate, ending a 35-year career with the company. Whose career? Okay, so in the first one, the Supreme Court has overturned a lower court death penalty ruling. This is considered a landmark in penal law. It's actually the pronoun this that really doesn't belong anywhere. Whether it's the death penalty or the ruling or the overturning, whichever it is, it's not clear. So make it clear. If you're explaining it to me and you can say what you mean, put it in writing. That way your audience members will be very clear. So make choices that are clear, concise, short. Do use the verb say. Do use present continuous tense. Do use present tense. Do not use past tense unless you absolutely have to. and do not use convoluted, complex language. Do your best to tell a story.